Chapter 2. Good times in this high-risk anime, never mind the background characters. Even a dog on the side of the road could die, Fu Anjing thought deeply. Her small face scrunched as her red eyes narrowed. When fights break out in Jujutsu Kaisen, everyone is a lunatic, a psychopath. Without a thigh to cling to, I'll definitely die, even though I've saved my progress. But it hurts, hey. What if I run into some pervert who likes to torture people? After weighing the pros and cons, and since her feet had become semicircles, making it almost impossible to stand on her own, Fu grabbed Sukuna's arm and stood up shakily. She lifted her head, enduring her fear, and looked seriously at Sukuna as she slowly spoke. "Father." Sukuna, who hadn't intended to pay her any mind, opened his eyes to look at her. A rare hint of confusion flickered in his gaze as he reached out and picked Fu up with ease. "You can talk." Thinking there might be a chance after all, Fu immediately nodded upon hearing Sukuna speak, looking at him with starry eyes. "That's right, I can talk, father." Sukuna seemed to frown in disgust, suppressing the urge to throw Fu back as he stared at her. "Who is your father? Don't go around claiming parents randomly." Fu immediately got anxious. After all, she was generated from his negative emotions. How could he just disown her like that? In truth, she just wanted to cling to a powerful backer. "You are my father, look at how much I look like you." Hearing this, Sukuna looked at Fu's face. She didn't even blush or skip a beat while lying and felt a flicker of interest. Aside from her eyes being red like his, there was no resemblance, yet there was a strange sense of kinship. He seemed to tacitly accept it. Interesting. "Hey, brat." His tone shifted back to one of disgust as he set Fu down. "So weak. If you were outside, you'd probably be stepped to death." Being suddenly dropped and teased, he was basically calling her a noob. She immediately scrambled up and put her hands on her hips, glaring at Sukuna. "First, I'm not called brat, I'm called Fu. Second, I'm not a weakling." Huh? Sukuna seemed amused, lazily watching the miniature person in front of him. "Fu. Heh, brat." Clearly, Sukuna was going to call her whatever he wanted. She couldn't do anything about it, so she just clenched her fists and climbed down. Once on the ground, she was pleasantly surprised to find that her cursed energy had actually increased a bit, allowing her to barely walk. Her legs had become more detailed. Fu was overjoyed. She ran all over Sukuna's innate domain, crawling into piles of bones to play. However, after a rib almost poked her eye out, she never crawled into the bone piles again. 20 minutes later, she crawled back onto Sukuna's lap, looking utterly drained. She lay down and stared blankly up at Sukuna's chin. "Father, how did you survive in a place like this?" Sukuna only gave Fu a faint glance, remaining silent for a moment before speaking. "Meditation. So just spacing out. And you call it meditation?" She spaced out along with Sukuna, feeling like life had no meaning. However, Sukuna seemed to have found a new way to pass the time, a new source of fun. For a long time after that, Sukuna would occasionally poke Fu's head with his finger or just pick her up and shake her. Was he trying to see if she had a brain? Usually, in these situations, Fu would bite him. Sukuna would then lift her up to see how long she could hold on before letting go, or he would pinch her arm to see if there were actual bones inside. This continued until Fu grew to the height of Sukuna's thigh, at which point he finally restrained himself a little. Fu's hands and feet were now no different from a human's, and her face was no longer a semicircle. However, she believed Sukuna had simply grown bored of his toy. After nearly half a year of warm father-daughter time with Sukuna, her cursed energy had reached nearly grade 2. Except for the very beginning, she now addressed Sukuna by his name, only calling him father when she was in trouble or teasing him. During this period, Fu also became able to use an innate technique. Unsurprisingly, it was slash. She could use the technique without any tools. Sukuna, watching from the side, wasn't surprised. He seemed to have known all along. When she opened the Undertale status panel, she could clearly see her health bar and damage increasing. She also surprisingly found her phone from her previous life in her inventory. It was exactly the same, but once she took it out, she realized it needed to be charged. However, she could charge it with cursed energy. Since cursed energy could be recovered once depleted, she tried to charge it. Unfortunately, her cursed energy wasn't even enough to turn it on. She could only give up in pain. In Sukuna's eyes, Fu had just conjured a brick out of thin air and was pouring cursed energy into it. Had she gone stupid? When she was very bored, she would take elastic bandages out of her inventory. Sukuna, Sukuna, wanna play? Sukuna looked up at Fu, who was suddenly looking very excited. Play what? Rock, paper, scissors. Sukuna looked disdainful, childish. 3 minutes later, Fu let out an evil laugh. Heh, you lost, Sukuna. Sukuna sighed as he watched Fu's movements. She was tying a third delicate little braid on him, while on Fu's head sat a single, crooked little braid. When she was tying the first braid on Sukuna, Fu had approached his hair with the bandages and an evil look on her face. Sukuna had shot her a threatening glare, but she was long used to it and didn't fall for it, directly tying the first neat braid on his head. Fu had to teach Sukuna for a long time before he barely learned how. When it was her turn to lose, he retaliated by tying an incredibly ugly pigtail that pointed straight up to the sky. In this way, another half-year of good times passed. Fu had grown to the height of Sukuna's chest, and her strength had reached grade 1. Her ego inflated. She walked straight up to Sukuna with a swagger. Sukuna, I challenge you. She had originally wanted to call him Old Geezer, but she didn't dare. At first, Sukuna found it a bit novel, fighting Fu like he was playing with a child. But he gradually realized that she seemed to be able to predict his movements. Every time ended with Fu lying on the ground, exhausted from using up her cursed energy. Sukuna would then pick her up by the scruff of her neck and carry her back to the massive ribcage throne. One time, after Sukuna won with overwhelming force, he watched as Fu lay like a puddle of mud on a massive rib, slowly recovering her strength. Sukuna, standing nearby, didn't forget to mock her, truly useless. Fu, who had been limp, seemed to feel something. Ignoring Sukuna's mockery, she began to sense her own cursed energy. Seeing her serious expression, Sukuna also put away his teasing attitude. Hey brat, have you gone stupid? She didn't answer Sukuna. It felt as though some external seal had been broken. Sukuna, Suku, feeling from when she first arrived began again. That sensation of being on the verge of death and rebirth. She forced her exhausted body to stand up and look at Sukuna. Am I going to die, father? Tears welled in her eyes and her voice trembled slightly. She seemed unable to hold on any longer. A single tear rolled down her cheek and dropped, and her vision vanished along with it. Perhaps it was all too sudden, as even Sukuna was stunned. Sukuna just watched, making no further moves. His eyes darkened, his thoughts unknown, boring. Nighttime in Tokyo. An infant like cursed spirits. Cursed energy suddenly surged in a short time, breaking through to special grade. In almost an instant, the underground hospital was turned into a living hell. Just as the cursed spirit was about to cause further destruction, a small hand suddenly burst out from within the infant spirit's body. After a struggle, a girl's head emerged, and she quickly crawled out, collapsing onto the ground. Cough, cough, how disgusting. Fu was covered in the cursed spirit's purple blood and human-like viscera. Supporting herself against the wall, she stood up and turned to look coldly at the mass of flesh before her. She raised her hand to launch a slash, but she immediately coughed up blood. Damn it. Her cursed energy had been depleted from the fight with Sukuna, but thinking back to her tragic yet beautiful appearance earlier, she was suddenly filled with joy. She hugged her chest and leaned back against the wall. My death was truly too beautiful. 3 parts panic, 3 parts pain, and 4 parts sincere reluctance in my eyes. That final tear was the perfect finishing touch. While she was still immersed in her tragic beauty, a cold voice suddenly rang out in her mind. Brat, stop being so narcissistic. Hearing Fu's narcissistic speech, whatever tiny bit of sadness or reluctance Sukuna might have felt vanished completely. Chapter 3. Gojo Satoru's home was looted. That voice gave me a start. I quickly looked at the back of my hand, but there was nothing there. Before I could even finish, Sukuna's voice echoed in my mind. Step back. Almost instinctively, the moment I stepped back, the massive body of that infant cursed spirit slammed right into the spot where Fu had just been standing. Realizing something was wrong, I hurried toward the nearby emergency exit. Enduring the physical discomfort, I quickly ran up to the surface and hid behind a damaged private car. I slumped to the ground, gasping for air. The stench of blood and filth clinging to me constantly assaulted Fu's senses. Nauseating. The explosion at the underground hospital in the early hours quickly caught the attention of the jujutsu world, and an assistant supervisor was immediately notified. The assistant supervisor then notified Gojo Satoru and Suguru Gido. Judging by the power of the explosion, it was likely a grade 1 or even a special grade. They were the only ones who could be sent for the job. Do you know what time it is? Are you going to let me sleep at night or what? He had been sound asleep. Woken up directly by a phone call, a resentful Gojo cat got dressed at light speed and kicked the door open, only to see Suguru Gido walking out of his room at that exact moment. The two exchanged a look and understood instantly. Suguru Gido summoned a flying cursed spirit, and he and a grumpy Gojo rushed to the scene. Fu watched as the infant cursed spirit drew closer, swatting away the car she was hiding behind. Just as her life seemed to be at an end, a blast of blue instantly tore the cursed spirit apart, reducing it to a pile of shredded flesh. Honestly, it's just one cursed spirit. Was it really necessary for Suguru and me to step in? A white-haired guy with a swagger more arrogant than an old man's walked over, followed by someone with weird bangs. Wait, is it a cursed spirit? Suguru Gido behind him also approached. Satoru, what's wrong? Fu kept her head down, sweating profusely, having forgotten for a moment that she was a cursed spirit. When she looked up again, she had put on an adorable, innocent expression. So cute, Tilda. Before Suguru Gido could speak, Gojo Satoru picked Fu up in his hands. Indeed, Fu's body had shrunk again after coming outside, her hands like those of a rag doll. Suguru, look how cute she is. Why don't we keep her? Tilda. Suguru Gido looked at Gojo Satoru with a look of utter helplessness. Satoru, stop messing around. She's a cursed spirit. Gojo Satoru immediately brought Fu right up to Suguru Gido's face. Fu also put on her most charming look, and both of them stared at him with wide, puppy-dog eyes, as if to say, look at how tiny she is. Nothing bad will happen. Yeah. What bad intentions could a little cursed spirit possibly have? Tilda. Ultimately, Suguru Gido couldn't win against Gojo Satoru. He took out his phone and called the assistant supervisor to file a report. Afterward, they found one of Sukuna's fingers among the remains of the infant cursed spirit. This was the first of Sukuna's fingers. Good grief! Those old oranges were woken up in the middle of the night and gathered together, refusing to agree to this under any circumstances. Gojo Satoru pointed righteously at Fu, who was sitting on Suguru Gido's hand watching the drama unfold, and said, I'm using her to store cursed tools. After saying that, he glanced around and immediately zeroed in on Suguru Gido's bulging pocket. He reached in directly to grab it. Satoru. That's a cursed spirit orb. Beside them, Fu watched in shock as Gojo Satoru picked up the cursed spirit orb. Gojo Satoru, are you really going to make me, a cursed spirit, eat a cursed spirit orb? You're unbelievable. But Gojo Satoru didn't care about any of that. He picked up the cursed spirit orb and shoved it into Fu's mouth. She can store things. In the end, Gojo Satoru simply ignored the old orange's words and left, carrying Fu with him. Inside the Jujutsu High dormitory, Gojo Satoru placed Fu on a table, took off his sunglasses and looked at her with his 6 eyes. Fu's cursed energy was nearly depleted, so in Gojo Satoru's eyes, she was just a grade 3 piece of trash. However, she was exceptionally talented to be able to use a technique at only grade 3. She just looked a bit silly. Is your technique slash? Having been woken up in the middle of the night for a mission, he wasn't sleepy anymore once he returned. He kept poking Fu's head, tiny hands and little belly with his finger, even going so far as to pull at her face with both hands. Helpless, she was a cursed spirit and couldn't win a fight. She was afraid he'd just blast her to pieces with a blue, or maybe he wouldn't even need to. He could choke me to death with one hand right now. Hey. Little cursed spirit, can you talk? Little cursed spirit, why are you ignoring me? Little cursed spirit, what's with that expression? Little cursed spirit, how could you bite me? Disobedient cursed spirits will be eaten by the weird bangs guy next door. Little cursed spirit, little cursed spirit, little cursed spirit, little cursed spirit. Fu maintained her expressionless face. because she knew that if she spoke, Gojo Satoru definitely wouldn't go to sleep. Finally, around 2 in the morning, Gojo Satoru felt a hint of sleepiness. Before sleeping, he didn't forget to toss a blanket to Fu, and without a care in the world, he placed a cursed spirit right next to his pillow and fell asleep. He's really got some nerve. Fu crawled up from the bed, looking at Gojo Satoru with a face full of resentment. She grumbled a few times in her heart and looked at her clothes with disgust. Although the blood and flesh on her had vanished after the cursed spirit was exorcised, she still felt a wave of nausea. In just that short amount of time, her limbs had recovered quite a bit. Aside from still being tiny, her movements weren't hindered at all, so she swaggered straight into the bathroom. She took off her clothes and tossed them into the almost new washing machine. Does Gojo Satoru not use a washing machine? Right, he probably just sends everything straight to the dry cleaners. Is it a shower? This height is very unfriendly to Fu. With no other choice, tiny Fu had to step on a stool, climb onto the washing machine, and reach the sink next to it to start adjusting the precision instrument for the water temperature. Soaking in the hot water washed away some of her fatigue, and she lay comfortably in the sink. As expected of young Master Gojo, even the hand soap is so high-end. Before long, the sink was filled with lavender-scented bubbles. While still immersed in the pleasant hot water, she wasn't paying attention and tumbled out of the sink. Ouch, what happened? When Fu scrambled back up, she realized her size had recovered a bit more. She was now about the size of 3 or 4 palms. Left with no choice, Fu pushed the stool over to the shower. By stepping on it, she could just barely reach. After a quick wash, she was nearly back to her original size by the time she came out. Looking at herself in the mirror, she chuckled. No obvious gender characteristics, whatever. Boy or girl doesn't matter. If people think she's a boy or a girl, then that's what she'll be. Casually drying off the water, she walked to Gojo Satoru's wardrobe, opened it, and started rummaging through. They're all new, the tags haven't even been removed. Does he just throw clothes away as soon as they get dirty? Evil rich people, I admit I'm salty. As an act of revenge, she deliberately made a mess of the wardrobe. Are they all the same? She casually pulled out a new set of clothes. It looked like a school uniform. She ripped off the tag and put it on. The top was baggy and the pant legs were far too long. Please. How is this any different from a child stealing an adult's clothes? Fu, however, didn't care about that. The first light of dawn shone through the window, illuminating the room. Gojo Satoru yawned and stretched. Morning, little cursed spirit Tilda in a daze. He reached out to grope around the pillow, but his hand found nothing. Gojo Satoru was instantly wide awake. He looked around and froze. His clothes were scattered everywhere with traces of cursed energy on them, and the floor was covered in water. Has a thief broken into Jujutsu High? Without even changing out of his pajamas, he searched everywhere, even looking under the bed, but Fu was nowhere to be found. Just as he was anxiously scratching his head, a sudden chewing sound came from the kitchen. Gojo Satoru thought, "Oh no," and immediately ran over. He saw that the once tiny cursed spirit had actually grown. The fridge was wide open. The limited edition daifuku and cakes inside were all gone. The culprit, Fu, was wearing his clothes and eating his edamame cream-flavored kikufuku. Fu nonchalantly swallowed the last bite, seemingly only just noticing Gojo Satoru standing at the door. "Morning, Gojo Satoru. The sweets you picked are quite good." Gojo Satoru's teeth were nearly grinding to dust. He reached out to grab her, but Fu dodged. "Dare you? You have some nerve eating my food." Suguru Gido, who was washing up next door, heard the sounds of a fierce struggle. "What's wrong, Satoru?" He immediately pushed the door open and saw the room in a state of chaos. The once tiny cursed spirit had grown overnight, becoming a grade 1 cursed spirit, and was being held up by Gojo Satoru while wearing his school uniform. Chapter 4. Becoming a special student to avoid exorcism inside Suguru Gido's dormitory. Satoru Gojo, Suguru Gido, and Fu, 2 humans and 1 cursed spirit, sat facing each other around a round table. Gojo had also changed his clothes and sat to one side, huffing and refusing to speak to Fu. He didn't understand why Gido hadn't exorcised her. Suguru Gido wasn't as unreliable as Satoru Gojo, and Fu couldn't help but become a bit more serious when facing him. Guido's fox-like eyes looked at her with a smile, his hands crossed on the table. The two were silent for a moment before Guido spoke first. Do you know why I'm not exorcising you? Because you're really weak. Just as Fu was about to snap, he continued. However, you have the strength of a grade 1 cursed spirit, yet you haven't attacked Satoru or me from start to finish. Why is that? Fu's expression softened slightly as she shifted into a comfortable position against the sofa, closing her eyes in silence. How should she answer? Say she couldn't bear to? Say she was a transmigrator? That she couldn't bring herself to hit that handsome face? Besides, she didn't even dare to fight. After a long while, Fu opened her eyes and looked at Suguru Gido. Because I cherish life, and I don't want to proactively attack humans. This answer surprised both Suguru Gido and Satoru Gojo. Do cursed spirits cherish life? Satoru Go, standing to the side, looked disdainful. Heh, do you think I believe that? You're a grade 1 cursed spirit. Who knows if you've done anything bad? Hearing this, Fu immediately stood up, bracing her hands on the table. She glared resentfully at Gojo, who was acting like an arrogant lord, feeling that he was targeting her. Whitehair, it's just because I ate some of your food, isn't it? Is it really worth targeting me like this? Gojo was also displeased and stood up, planting a foot on the table. Who are you calling Whitehair? You cursed spirit. I'm calling you Whitehair, so what? You picked me up and brought me back. You bullied me for over 2 hours. What's wrong with me eating some of your stuff? When did I ever bully you? You're wearing my clothes, using my bathroom, eating my food. I shouldn't have picked you up. It's not like I begged you to pick me up. Believe it or not, I'll exorcise you right now. Bring it on. Who's afraid of who? Suguru Gido couldn't listen anymore. He slammed the table and stood up. Stop. Everyone stop. Suguru Gido stood up and firmly grabbed both of their shoulders. Enough. Stop arguing. He turned to look at Satoru Gojo. Satoru, you're the one who picked her up. You have to take responsibility for her. Then he turned to look at Fu, cursed spirit. Fu, since you've already been brought back, you can only stay at Jujutsu High. Letting you go is impossible. Fu and Satoru Go both looked at Suguru Gido and spoke in unison. On what grounds? Inside Jujutsu High. Teacher Yaga looked helplessly at the cursed spirit the two troublemakers had brought back. Raising a cursed spirit. Satoru Gojo immediately interrupted. She was tiny before. Yaga looked seriously at the grade 1 cursed spirit Fu, who was sitting properly in front of him. Then he looked at Gojo and Gido, who were sitting stiffly beside her. Whose idea was this? Gido and Fu pointed at Satoru Gojo at the same time. Figures. Satoru Gojo was immediately punished by Yaga's iron fist. Gido also spoke up with the facts. Teacher Yaga, why not let her stay at Jujutsu High? She doesn't have the instinctual behavior of ordinary cursed spirits to attack humans, and based on Satoru's and my observations, she won't harm humans. Originally, Yaga didn't agree, but after Satoru and Gido said something to him later, he actually agreed in the end. Then the process began. Cursed spirit. It's Fu, thank you. It was the first time he'd met one so polite. Yaga coughed, a bit unaccustomed to it. Fu, why do you want to join Jujutsu High? Fu lowered her eyes, setting aside the hostility she had when arguing with Satoru. The afternoon sunlight poured through the window into the large gymnasium. Her crimson eyes, which would normally make one's skin crawl, now made everyone feel incredibly at ease, as if they were radiating the light of justice. The sunlight happened to cover the top of her head, making it seem as if her whole body was radiating holy light. Her highly deceptive baby face made people involuntarily lower their guard. I want to change the world's perception of me. Translation. I don't want to be exorcised. This scene left both Satoru Gojo and Suguru Gido stunned. Teacher Yaga, the only one present who was deeply moved, directly pressed a hand on Fu's shoulder. Past, looking at the figures of the three as they left, Yaga couldn't help but sigh, such a good child. If only she weren't a cursed spirit. I hope Jujutsu High can find a few more normal children like this. Satoru Gojo, who was walking in front, suddenly stopped. Fu reacted quickly and stepped to his side. We're here. This is your dormitory, special student. Fu opened the door to a single room, just like Yuji Itadori's room in the original story. Except. Fu opened the wardrobe. It was empty. The fridge was empty. There wasn't even a quilt. The only clothes she had now were the ones she had borrowed from Gojo earlier. How could she, a cursed spirit, have any luggage? She turned her head stiffly to look at Satoru Gojo. Satoru Gojo leisurely watched Fu look left and right, then laughed heartlessly. Ha ha ha, what's wrong? Fu really wanted to speak but felt it would be too embarrassing. After a long while, she only managed to squeeze out one sentence through gritted teeth. It's nothing. Seeming to see through Fu's predicament, Gojo became even more smug. He draped an arm over Fu's shoulder while twirling a black card in his other hand. I really can't do anything with, if you call me the great handsome Satoru Gojo. Maybe I can help you. Standing at the door, Suguru Gi spoke to Satoru with a smile. Satoru, you shouldn't be like that. Don't forget that your dorm has been flooded, and I am definitely not letting you stay with me. Didn't turn off the tap after her shower, and the clothes she threw around clogged the drain. After saying that, Suguru Gido turned and left heartlessly, leaving Satoru Gojo alone to stand there in a daze. Fu immediately slapped Gojo's hand away and flashed a mischievous smile. If you call me the great beauty Fu, maybe I can help you Tilda Gojo cat. APG continues to be punished. In the end, whether he called her that or not didn't matter. She walked with a confident stride, holding Satoru Gojo's black card. Of course, Gojo was the one who paid, and Gojo was the one carrying everything. After all, she was a cursed spirit. Ordinary people couldn't see her. Chapter 5. First meeting